Meeting to order. It's 2 o'clock. Welcome.
Al, that was perfect the other day that the president came in when I was getting stressed and you could introduce me. That worked out perfect.
Okay, so let's start with the roll call, Paul.
Okay, we have Dave Bedrick present, Ken Evans, Ray Zobot, Jeffrey Randall, Jerry Carbone, Jim Carter, and Karen Gilmartin. So we have a full quorum.
Thank you very much. And proof of notice?
Yes, proof of notice was posted for statute.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me all right? Do I need to talk loud?
No.
I can talk loud. Not a problem. Okay, first I want to those that recently returned, I want to welcome everybody back to Pelican Marsh. You know, it's been 2 years and 1 month since Hurricane Irma, and things are looking real good here, and it'll get even better shortly. More on that in a minute. First of all, looking back over the summer months and all that was accomplished, I want to thank all the board members, staff, and all the volunteers for their efforts. I want to thank the year-round residents that endured the process during all the upgrades as well. I also want to publicly thank Ken Evans for facilitating board meetings in June, August, and September while I was out of town with participating over the phone. It was something that Ken did not sign up for, but did a fine job as we discussed and proceeded with implementing numerous enhancements, including painting the outside of the community center, the adjacent landscaping, the completion of the 20% increase in the parking lot, building pickleball courts, a new and greatly improved audio-visual system, and discussing and updating rules and regulations. Next, I also want to acknowledge the work of Jeff Randall, who previously assembled 4 existing independent rules and regs. Over the summer, he recently updated them based on input from committees, staff directors, and board members with a coordinated review by our council. As one volunteer stated at the town hall the other day, I must have read 20 different versions, and it certainly feels that way to me too. Jeff helped create a 5th section for pickleball and put it into a coherent document, independent sections, while working with our attorney. They have since been augmented further based on resident input from the from the board meeting last month and the town hall meeting earlier this week. Many of you asked why the commitment of resources to rules and regs. Well, if you weren't at the town hall meeting, here's really why. First of all, they're required by our governing documents. In addition, it's become a more important document as the county now wants these officially filed with them, like our declarations, our covenants, and amendments there too. My understanding is in the past the county did not require it. It is for that reason, and consistent with what we started 2 years ago to get our house in better order, especially after experiencing key staff turnover. By the way, our bylaws at 2.03 state that the board of directors can modify rules and regs with or without notice to members. So clearly, having the owner discussion at the last board meeting and a town hall meeting earlier this week was not required, but an act of board-initiated additional transparency. Rules and regs are a working, living document to be modified as the community changes over time. With regard to that statement, I'm pleased we now have automated tools to provide management metrics for evaluation. I can also confidently say our house is in good order. We are on the cusp of living a new beginning as the season begins. Pickleball, the fastest growing sport in the country over the last decade, probably even longer, is a new amenity to our community to complement tennis, bocce, fitness, spinning, and all the other fun and daily occurring activities. I encourage you, and I say live it up, join us Tuesday night, November 6th, for the official pickleball ribbon cutting. We'll have some demonstration and some fun with it. And by the way, our first class courts opened on Tuesday for playing. I know an email got out, so again, if anybody in here doesn't get those emails, you should get your email address to Linda so you can stay current with what's going on. The landscaping and replanting of the parking lot is about to be completed, and that will conclude the summer initiatives. Actually, I thought I saw a tree going in today. Somewhat related, sometimes we don't get everything that we want. Over a year ago, Jim Brock and then others asked me about building a bike path for the first parking spot. We looked into it. It was another good idea. It could not be accomplished due to county restrictions. Nonetheless, if you have an idea, please continue to forward them to Paul, our general manager, or a board member. And if you're biking here, please carefully use the sidewalk or the easement path for easy access. It's budget season, and the Finance Committee, staff, and your board have been working on next year's budget. Today, we will skip Ken's traditional treasury report, as he will incorporate those comments in the budget discussion later on today at new business. I also have a new subject that you likely will be hearing more about in the coming months leading up to the annual meeting. As a community, we need to decide what we want to do, if anything. Okay. Let me briefly introduce you to the topic. Above ground storage fuel tanks in Pelican Marsh. In summary, our existing declarations at 8.13 state no above ground tanks shall be allowed except for heating pools or if limited to 5 gallons for emergency, grills, on and on and on, and it must be properly screened. A member vote would be required if we change from that current language. We have had requests recently to approve a large above-ground tank for outdoor cooking. We have also become aware of other above-ground tanks operating within Pelican Marsh. Our council agreed that they should not be allowed over 5 gallons unless for pool heating, because that is what the declarations state. While we're still researching the subject with regulatory agencies, we wanted you to be aware of this. We have already notified all of the HOA presidents of this issue, and this issue will be discussed at the upcoming Association Advisory Committee meeting to see if there's support for amending the Foundation's documents to allow above-ground storage tanks to supply other equipment such as generators, grills, and things like that. I believe after we gather more pertinent information, the board will discuss this and through a vote of the members, decide if we should amend the declarations to allow tanks if this is desired by the community. You know, I'm no expert in this, but I know a little bit about the 5-gallon ones. They are heavily regulated. They're all date stamped. And a service provider that fills those tanks, they won't fill them if you're beyond the 10-year date stamped on there. So there are regulations there, but I have no idea what they do for larger tanks. When we find out more information on this, we'll let you know, but I wanted to give you a tip on that. And on that note, I conclude my remarks, and I'll go to Paul for the president's report.
Point of order, please.
Okay.
We skipped over approval.
Approval of the minutes.
Sorry.
He was so excited to be back and give his talk.
It's been Al's minute.
Well, let's do that. Thank you very much.
Well,
I'll open up the discussion to the board about the approval of the minutes. Any comments?
make a motion that we accept the minutes.
Second.
Hearing no further discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Dave.
David,
Yes.
one additional point on the tanks.
Yes.
You've got the fire marshal has the requirements for the tanks.
Fire marshal? Okay.
Okay, they're the guys that control. In fact, if you have a 5-gallon tank and you're in a condominium of more than 2 units, you can't have one. If you got a grill, okay, you can only use a 2.5 pounder.
Oh.
Okay, there's a severe fine, okay, that goes along with it. But that's a fire marshal regulation, and I think if you take a look into what the regulations are with the fire marshal, I think there's something to do with distance between structures. When you get into the large tanks, that's why they want them buried.
And we have dairy tanks, but that's allowed.
Yeah, I know, but why we would want to change something that would be less safe
Yeah,
doesn't make any sense.
That's why I'm bringing it up. It's an issue.
Don't change it, leave it alone.
Okay.
I agree, Dave.
Okay, so it's the president's report, foundation manager's report.
Okay, I can sense the start of season is just around the corner, obviously, because coming to work this morning, it took me about 15 minutes longer to get to work. And last night, I had traffic jam and went home, so I can see they're coming back. Also, when I come in the mornings, I see a lot more people in the lobby now, socializing and having their morning coffee, so I can see we're starting to get there. So we're going to get ramped up pretty soon. Our summer projects are just about complete. As Dave mentioned earlier, the landscaping and the parking lot is just starting today to finish off that project. And we're also going to come back and restripe some of the faded spaces in the back section of the parking lot in the next few weeks, which will then finish the project for this summer or this season. And then obviously, starting next summer, we're going to go ahead and reseal and stripe the entire parking lot, which will give the parking lot a new updated look. As will be mentioned later on in the meeting and the committee reports, that our pickleball courts are now open, and Joe Johan and the pickleball committee will be updating you more on that when we get to it. In the next few weeks, we will have scheduling pressure washing of all the pavers around the community center, tennis center and courtyard areas, and the connecting areas between those two, just in time for season, so everything looks nice and fresh and clean. Upcoming projects still to finish this year will be upgrading the tennis court drainage, which is scheduled to start 1st of December. And we're also still planning to convert a section of the playground to accommodate a basketball goal. The foundation has taken additional measures to better manage the community center and track usage of our facilities. These measures now will include a new check-in scanner new check-in scanners that only read the new membership key fobs that are being given out. Does everybody know what the key fobs look like, the new little key card fobs?
They're a lot smaller, and they don't have your picture on it, so if you have your picture on it, that's the old one.
There you go, thank you.
Get it out.
So the old cards you have the picture on them will be invalid, so make sure you get them changed in. The reason why you need to do that is because with these new scanners, the new scanners only read these new fobs. So members playing tennis or pickleball need to check into the pro shop. Members playing bocce or exercising or participating in an exercise class, playing cards, we need to check in at the front desk. And then members using the fitness center now will have to swipe their membership key fob at the gym entrance to unlock the doors and gain access. And all guests using the community center and amenities must make sure that a sponsoring member has checked them in and is paying their appropriate guest fees. The reason why we're doing all this is it's very important that we know who is using the community center for insurance purposes, as well as able to track the usage of the facilities to make sure we have enough staff scheduled to support those activities and events going on. And also when we plan other activities and events, that we don't overload the community center when it's in high demand. Now the implementation of this new system is going to go into effect November 1st. And I've instructed staff to watch, and when members are coming in, if they don't check in as they're supposed to, they're supposed to stop you and say, excuse me, can you please get we need your pass to get you checked in. So please understand this is for our benefit and your benefit to make us more efficient and safe. And so please make sure you have your new key fobs and checking in as you come up to the community center from now on.
Paul, I just want to make a remark that the entire board unanimously supports what Paul just said about use your fob. It helps us because it'll improve our metrics. So when we do other planning things, we can extract information and have better data to make better decisions.
Thank you.
May I ask a question about the fob?
Yes.
If we come to the community center more than once a day, do we check in each time?
Yes.
Yes.
As reported in the October publication of the Pelican Brief, Comcast is requesting that all remaining homes, which is still about 200 homes, who have not converted over to the new fiber optic system, do so by December 13th this year to get their scheduled free install of the system. All appointments made after this date will be subject to an install charge. Comcast will be shutting down the old legacy system around the first part of next year because it's very difficult to deliver services over two systems at once. And it's also caused some issues with the service on the new system, as we've noticed over the past couple weeks, as more people are arriving back. Those who have not converted to the new system by the deadline will one day come home to find that they will have no TV or internet service in their homes. And then they're going to have to wait to call Comcast and then pay Comcast for a service fee to come out and have it installed. So we're just asking everyone to be proactive and do your scheduling now and have your home installed with the new system before your time runs out. And if you have any questions on this process, please call the admin office and we'll give you the instructions on how to properly call for the install. Now, if you're having any issues with your Comcast system and services, we first ask you please contact the Comcast call center at 877-834-6757. That's posted on the website too. When you call, make sure you check with the operator to make sure you're speaking with the Fort Myers, Florida branch. If not, ask to be transferred to that location. Now, for some reason, if you do this process and you still don't find results with the service, then write down or email us the specific issues that you're having and send that to cable@publicandmarsh.com, and then we'll take that from there and contact the appropriate management team that we have with Comcast to make sure it's expedited and fixed ASAP. And lastly, just again, remember the staff and I are here always to help and assist. If we can, our doors are always open when we're open in the hours. And we're always open for comments and suggestions. Any other questions? That's my report.
All right, thank you, Paul.
Question, Paul. When you do the cleanup on the parking lot, the restriping, since I believe all approvals have been done through the county, will you please restripe the area that is now a ugly yellow as we come in? I think like I'm arriving at Walmart, and just change it to white to be uniform with the rest of the community?
I did ask that question to the contractor, and I'm checking with the county to make sure it's okay. And so, yes, we'll definitely get it restriped to white.
Thank you.
Okay, if there's no further questions, we'll go to committee reports, and Dennis would be first.
So,
You have the mic, or go ahead.
You might want to, Paul, you might want to start.
so what I'd like to do actually, before I get into covering some of the tennis and pickleball things, is ask my tennis committee chair to come up and say a few words, and then have Cindy, the pickleball chair, come up and say a few words, and then I'll kind of summarize it.
Sure.
If that works.
Thank you.
Should you go first? Well, technically, yeah.
Hi. So pickleball, our tennis committee had its first meeting of the season in October.
Name for the record, please.
Steve Burke,
Thank you.
tennis committee chairman. So, and we welcome 3 new members to the committee, of which I'm one, and Lou Paper and Joan Van Berg are the other 2. And Johan's going to give you the down and dirty on the courts and the systems. What I'd like to just mention briefly is that we did speak at some length about the tennis pickleball interface, and now that pickleball is a feature for us here at Pelican Marsh, we are hoping that everyone will embrace the new recreational facility and either, if not actually engage in playing pickleball along with our friends, at least understand that we need to help each other enjoy our facility. So, having said that, the challenges of the past are behind us. We need to face the challenges of the future together, and that means that we need to treat each other like friends and neighbors. So, that's what I got.
Thank you.
Do you want to do the
Floor is yours.
the pictures?
Not yet. I'll do it in a minute. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Cindy Villarosa from Ravenna, and I'm the pickleball chair. I have a little bit more to say than Steve, but just to jump on what Steve said, he and I had coffee the other day and decided there's a lot of things in common that we all have. So what we're going to be doing is every once in a while, I'll go to his meetings, he'll come to our meetings, and we'll see what we can do together. We're looking to do a number of social things together, which I think will be a great idea. And all are welcome. So if you want to come, not with nasty complaints, let's put it out there, but you say something nice first and then you move on. But we're there to listen, we're there to make everybody happy and work together. If you've seen the pickleball courts, go out and see them. They're just beautiful. I mean, I have to say, I am thanking this board. I'm giving you my hand. Wow. When Pelican Marsh does it, Pelican Marsh does it right. I mean, really. Mary and I laughed the other day. 4 years ago, we wanted a place in the parking lot with a net. That's all we wanted, we said. Then we went to a multi-use little court, you put the basketball there. No, we're not gonna do that. Well, this is what you did. So listen, I'm gonna tell you, I've had friends come by and say, wow. I mean, you look at the website, you look at the pictures, and it's just a class act. So our values, I spoke to a realtor yesterday who's a tennis player, and he said to me, Cindy, I'll be honest with you, checks the boxes. He said, I've had clients say to me, I'm looking down here, do you have pickleball? I say, no. They say, don't show me Pelican Marsh. So now we check another box, and every box that we check is a box for us. It's a box for us, every single one. Our values have moved up. So that being said, our beginner lessons have already filled up 2 days. Johan has already had 1 private lesson last night, and oh, there's our private lesson person. Walked right in.
Perfect timing.
And 2 or 3 times we're talking to him about doing private lessons. So it's really there. It's happening, and we've been playing in the mornings, and we're filling the courts. So we're not even here yet. Wednesday, November 6th, is our ribbon cutting grand opening 4 to 6. Please come. Please come. You don't have to be pickleball. We're neighbors. I've come to things here that I'm never going to play. I've done bocce, my husband and I, a few times. Come. It's neighbors meeting neighbors. What's the thing that we've always wanted? One last thing. I have something here that I'd like to give to the board, and it's a request. We're looking for shading. You know, it's a little hot over there.
Do tell.
We're gonna do it later on,
Oh, do you want me to
as
hold
though
on to
we
that?
already knew you were gonna ask.
Okay, that's even better. Listen, as the treasurer at Ravenna, I really like when somebody one-ups a request and everybody knows what it is.
It was part of the budgeting process.
Oh, all right, fine. So then I don't have to get into that. So there you go. So if anybody has any questions, oh, yes.
I just have one. Dave, you mentioned how important it is to use these new fobs so we get data for the
Yes.
future.
Yes.
Is there going to be a way to tell whether you're here to play pickleball or here to play tennis? So we don't get that all mixed up. We might want to put more
That's a good
pickleball
question.
courts.
That's a good
It
question
would be
because
long to
that's a great
have
question.
data.
Yeah, because I've come in and now, and we're telling people to go into the pro shop to log in, but it really would be a good idea. I mean,
Yeah.
you can see, like for me, if I'm here, then you can figure it out, but we've got
Because
people
if there's
now
a lot
showing
more
up.
demand for one.
We
it
need
just
to know,
works.
you know, listen, like everything, like all your metrics, we need to know. Maybe we can put a second one, and if you're playing pickleball, you hit that one, so that'll keep the number. I don't know. That's above my pay grade.
Well, that was more addressed to
To the
the
board.
management. Is-
I think that's a great idea. We really need to know that. Yeah,
Thank you.
that's on them. Thanks. All right.
Quick little note on that. That's a tricky little thing, because when you walk into the mate building, is do you know whether you're going to go play cards or go play bocce or go into the gym?
Well, we will
Eventually,
know about
the gym will be specific, right?
And that's-
So you could maybe put the key fob readers in different places to cover that. It's just adding,
Two different.
Yes,
Exactly.
the more we can
Exactly.
automate, the better it is.
so,
Just to continue. the
Yeah, sorry.
comment, I mean, going back, there was such a big demand for pickleball that we converted a tennis court. So some people would argue we lost some tennis courts to get more pickleball. Now, if there's more and more demand for pickleball, then we should know that, because that might impact how we manage the future. So we should be focusing on differentiating the demand, I think, somehow.
I agree.
okay. So listen, for me, this is an exciting time here at Pelican Marsh. Our northern friends are coming back. We have pickleball courts that are now playable. It's in the pro shop. It's fantastic. I had a great moment this morning. I was in the middle of teaching my favorite cardio tennis class, and I look over and Victor's teaching a clinic of 6 people on the pickleball courts, and the other 3 pickleball courts are all being played on, and the tennis courts are completely full. 9:30 this morning, we were completely full. 8 tennis courts, 4 pickleball courts, and like Joan said to me, 12 courts, 1 community. And I thought that was a great way to put it, right? We went from a facility with 9 tennis courts to a facility with 8 tennis courts, 4 pickleball courts, 12 courts, 1 community. So, great time for me. But before I get into the rest of that, I want to take a moment to openly thank the entire staff here at Pelican Marsh. It's a privilege to work alongside all of you, from the staff at the front desk to Linda and Kate, David, Jim, Lynn, Patrick, and Paul in the admin center. This all works as a team, and we couldn't make it happen without them. I'm particularly grateful to my Pro Shop family, Sandy, Victor, Jody, Megan, and Christy, and our court maintenance guys, Joe, Hal, and Matt. I am blessed to have them on my team. I really am. And so without their help, a lot of things don't get done. We got a lot of things done this summer. We've updated the Pro Shop. We put in new floors, a new counter. We've merchandised it, and we've got new merchandise coming in every week. It's going to get better and better from there. We are going to start promoting that merchandise to the entire community, not just the people who come into the Pro Shop. So this is a place where everybody can come shop for their Pelican Marsh shirts or hats or water bottles, etc. So that's coming. We added some new technology to the Pro Shop. We added an online reservation system, which is open for both pickleball and tennis. It's something you don't have to use. If you choose not to, you just call us like you always did, and we'll put your reservation in. You will get an email confirmation. But the tool is great because you can change a reservation, add a reservation, kind of at your leisure. I've had nothing but good feedback from that, so I'm excited about that. As far as tennis goes, we're busy. Clinics are filling up, cardios are filling up, fall leagues are in full swing. We've already had an Oktoberfest mixer. We've got another mixer coming up for Halloween. In November brings us a tennis exhibition, a Bay Colony Pelican Marsh Challenge, which is a golf/tennis event. You'll get more information on that shortly. And a Babolat demo day coming in December. And so we're busy on the tennis courts. Same thing goes really on the pickleball side. And actually, can we scroll up to the pictures of the Pro Shop really quick? For those who haven't seen the Pro Shop, please do stop by. That's the pickleball corner. Racks with the shirts. Tennis rackets behind the new counter. And I think from there we go into the pickleball. And for pickleball, over the course of the summer, I took a bunch of pictures, and it was basically the sequence of how this tennis court evolved into pickleball courts. And so I'd like to just go through them. That was the beginning stages of taking the clay off the tennis court, the base layer before we put anything down. Then we paved it and put sleeves in for the fencing and for the tennis nets. Underneath that, so on top of that paving went a gel layer, which looked like a rolled out carpet basically. And on top of that is now 2 base layers in paint, and now this is the finished product. And for me, it was cool to see that go down from day to day. And some days nothing would happen, and for 30 days we had a blacktop. And everybody's wondering why are we not doing anything, but that blacktop had to cure for 30 days before we could paint it. And the finished product was fantastic. There's still a couple little things that we need to take care of. We'll be adding some artificial grass to the sides where the rocks used to be between the pavers and the courts, both on the pickleball side and on the tennis side, so that we'll have a flat surface for seating and benches and so on. So the place is going to look unbelievable. It already does. The courts are really comfortable to stand on. So the impact on the legs is not quite as big. I am suggesting to people that we do proper warm-ups and that we get ready to play the game, especially if you haven't played it before. There are some inherent risks associated with it. But the place looks absolutely fantastic. I'm excited as heck. Like Cindy and Steve both mentioned, we're going to be trying to do some joint events. Some of them will be tennis and pickleball, where you accumulate points for teams. Others will just be mostly social. So again, I'm excited for this community, for this season. Cheers.
Is it worth mentioning the proper shoes for that court?
So, yeah, I mean, this is not a bad form. I think anytime we have an opportunity to mention that. The two biggest things for me on the pickleball courts is number one, respect, and number two, proper shoes. And for proper shoes, what I mean by that is court shoes that have non-marking soles. It's for your safety as well as for the integrity of the courts. We don't want them marked up with black running shoes. And so tennis shoes are not a good idea. They put your ankles at risk and they potentially mark up the courts.
You said tennis shoes?
No, running shoes. Sorry, my mistake. Running shoes. Tennis shoes are fine. Right? Tennis shoes are court shoes. They're fine. Yeah, sorry.
No, good.
You've lost your chance.
Any questions?
A little piggyback on the ribbon cutting. If you have an opportunity, sign up in the pro shop. We will be doing some prize giveaways, but only to the people who sign up in the pro shop. This gives us a better idea of how many people are potentially showing up so that we have enough refreshments for all of you.
Johan, a quick question. Does this get watered the same way the tennis courts needed to?
This does not get watered unless it rains.
Oh, it doesn't get watered.
Yeah, and an accidental sprinkler from this morning, but we're taking care of that.
Johan,
Yeah, you're welcome.
you might want to mention you're going to put a netting up between courts 2 and 3.
So there's a netting that just came in. We're putting a cable between between the fence posts between courts 2 and 3. We're using court 2 mostly as a teaching court, and to prevent balls from going from one court to the other in either direction, we're putting a net in that slides. It's essentially like a curtain, which we can then retract, and so that's already in. We just need to install it. Thank you, Jim. The other thing we're still putting up is windscreens behind the pickleball courts, which are not in at the moment.
Thank you. Anything else?
Any other questions?
Thanks, Johan.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, next we have old business. I thought there was only 2 things. Okay. I made one mistake. All right. Under old business, first one we have is item 9.1, rules and regulations. I open it up to the board for discussion.
Let me say that before you, before the board, we hope the final draft, after 20 drafts, of the proposed rules and regulations. There has been input on these rules and regulations from all the board members, from Johan, from Cindy Villarosa for pickleball, from Patrick for fitness, and from Lynn as the activities director. There has been input at the various meetings from members of the community. There was recently a town hall meeting where there were some good suggestions made, and these suggestions have been incorporated into the final draft. Accordingly, I would like to make a motion to approve the rules and regulations that are now before us.
Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion?
Number one, I don't have the final draft in front of me. I've had the bits and pieces. I'm assuming that it'll all be put together. I have a couple of comments to make and defer to my fellow board members. Jerry brought this up, and I think it's an excellent point. There seems to be some confusion between what are summer hours and reciprocal agreements. Reciprocal agreements are an outgrowth of the golf course industry, and they run from May 1 to October 1. Historically, Pelican Marsh has used that same system and then called it summer hours. I have no problem with the reciprocal time, but I have a great deal of problem with summer hours for the length that they are currently established in the rules and regulations and how the budget is put together. I believe summer hours should be June 1 to September 1 because of the changing demographics in this community. People use facilities different than they did 10 or 12 or 8 years ago. I'm told every year to bring this up at the budget hearings. I bring it up every year, nothing happens. I will continue to bring it up as long as I'm on this board. Reciprocals are fine, I have no problem with them. Summer hours, I believe, should be changed from June 1 to September 1.
Jim, excuse me, seasonal, not, is what you're saying, not summer hours, but seasonal.
Well, whatever term people like to use, seasonal hours are fine, but it's often been incorporated in the common terminology as summer hours.
What are the current dates?
Current dates are May 1 through October 1.
Again, it's October 1, it's May 1 till October 1, is the historical seasonal hours. Okay?
So,
Well, I don't, first of all, I do believe, Jim, that the latest edits from the information you provided last night are in front of you somewhere, because each board member got a copy of them. I think all,
The whole edit there,
Okay.
copy of that.
here's a copy for Jim. I thought those went out. They went out electronically.
What
I
did,
thought
what
we
did
also
you just
had
give
them.
me?
Pass those to Jim.
Oh,
all of it.
this is the whole
There is
set.
no copy here.
Okay.
okay.
Well, this, what,
But they did go out electronically last night.
Okay.
was sent email last night.
I know, I didn't bring them.
I have a question related to what Jim said. It's my understanding that these kinds of things, this is a living document, and it's my understanding that these kinds of things can change just as simply a result of input from owners and activity levels that we're finding and discussion, as opposed to being hard numbers that cannot be changed. I think the rules and regulations are a concept to make sure we're operating in a way that's basically what everybody wants, but that as we get more data, as we hope to get, with the better use of the information system, we have the opportunity to change all kinds of things.
I would agree. I don't remember seeing anything. I know they talk about off-season in the rules and regs, but I don't recall a time stipulation of hours and things like that in the rules and regs. I think those are outside of even the rules and regs. Does anybody else remember seeing those
What
hours?
currently stated is that the summer or off-season is May 1 to October 1. And consequently, quote, off-season hours immediately start at that point. My point all along, it's not the first time I've brought it up, is I have no problem with the reciprocal part of that. I do have a problem with the operational hours part of it. I do not think the two have to be joined at the hip. They could be separate items. I don't see it in the rules and regulations. Ken is right, you can change it at any time, but for all the time and effort we've been put into doing this, I think it's a little bit ridiculous in my point of view, is not to change it now and to establish two specific things. You have reciprocal time and you have off-season hours. Two different items. And I don't see it anywhere. You pointed out to me, you clearly defined that. I would acquiesce to your judgment.
The reference to the season in the rules and regulations is found on page 2, paragraph number 8, which says, the use of the word season in these rules shall refer to the time period of October 1 through April 30. The other reference to dates refers to January 1 through May 31st. We do not mention summer, but those are the hours referred to in the rules and regulations.
I understand that, Jeff. And then what happens is, immediately, from an operational point of view, what you just cited in number 8 becomes the operational hours for almost 5 months out of the year.
Well, I'm going to defer this to, or the question, to Johan, because Johan and Cindy, in fact, do you guys hear this phone, or is it just ringing in my ear?
It's just in your ear.
Good. Because Johan and Cindy for pickleball, Johan for tennis, have reviewed this, and they are the ones that say they approve it. And if it should be changed, maybe that's the case, but let's adopt what we have, talk to Johan, talk to Cindy, see how things work out, and then change it if it's necessary.
From a reciprocal standpoint, I have no problem. But I think my other part is operational, for the concern of this facility, fitness center, anything else that's available.
Are you talking about your office staff, Jim, operational, or are you talking about something else?
I'm talking about the complete operation of this community center,
That's what I thought.
that June 1 to October 1, or if you want to make it the last day of May. I don't care how you say it. My point is that operations currently coincide with reciprocal. And I'm saying the two should be separate so that the residents who are not involved in pickleball, tennis, or any of these other things have access to this facility just the same out of quote season, except for June, July, and August, as they would the rest of the year.
Jim, the point can be is well taken. However, we're working on this upcoming season, not the aftermath, the off-season. So in hours, nowhere in the rules and regs can we define 6 to 9, and then in the off-season, different hours. We January through March, we define before 12:30 is residents only, and that's about it. So it's another conversation. It's not part of the rules and regs.
You know,
So,
we're getting like Congress here, guys.
so we had a first and a second. Are there other comments?
What we're talking about, okay, rules and regulations, all of which could be changed in an instant through our administrative rights as a board.
Right.
Let's just put something in place. If it doesn't work out, or it has to be modified, the board can do it instantaneously if necessary.
Or more importantly,
What we're trying to do is guess everything that's going to happen, whether there's going to be birds flying over at 2 o'clock or birds flying over at 3. Let's do this thing here. We're going to beat it to death.
I agree with you. I think
I move that we approve, okay, we second it, and I ask for a vote.
I would like to say something first, please. Thank you. I just wanted to respond to the issues specifically that were brought up at the town hall meeting, because many of you were there. And from my perspective, a lot of those issues have been addressed. Forgive me, I have to look at this a little bit. There were some of the specific things that came up had to do with the firearm prohibition within the facilities, in the parking lot. And again, it was reiterated that the attorney has looked at that and has approved the way it appears in the documents. Not much I can say about that, I'm not an attorney. There were a lot of issues which I thought made a lot of sense about the definition of guests, and language has been changed in the rules and regulations so that we have what are called overnight guests versus local guests. Local being people who reside elsewhere but would come here and play, and defining when they can and cannot play, and that goes specifically again to season and the definition of season, and I think that was also, there were some complications about those dates, and that's been tightened up as well in the current version of the rules and regulations. I think that Dave did address some of the concerns about how are we going to regulate the guests, because there were concerns about that. And I think we're working on that. Paul addressed it as well with the staff, tightening up people coming in and how they use our facilities. Someone also had brought up about guest fees in that we as members of the community pay up front our $1,500, which gives us the right to use the facilities. At this point, I think it's just guest fees are charged for the specific amenities, and that concern will be looked at, but was not incorporated this time in the rules and regulations. And I think the time, we talked about the times, the dates, who's going to be what. And that's it for the rules and regulations, but I do feel things were tightened up.
Karen, thank you. It actually turned out to be, what we got done, it was 3 full pages typed of notes that were distributed to all the board members about what happened at the town hall. So we listened.
Good.
Thank you for the update.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening.
So, are there any other comments? Great. Yes. We have a first and a second. I'm going to call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Hey,
1 nay. Thank you very much. 9.1 is passed. Rules and regulations are passed. Next is a proposed amendment to section 403, 501, 510 of the bylaws.
This amendment is to the bylaws. It concerns qualifications, basically, of the directors, and it's set out in these rules and regulations, and in, or beg your pardon, in this amendment. And the big change is that we are requiring that a person who sits or runs for election as a director must reside within the community for at least 3 months every year. The next thing we've put in, and there was some issue about giving notice with regard to, oh, I'm sorry. The rule with regard to committee members is who can sit on a committee is the same as who can be on the board of directors. You have to be a resident at least for 3 months. The next one we've added is there was an issue or a question as to whether or not the committees had to give notice of their meetings. As a matter of law, it is not necessary that committees give notice of their meetings. However, we have put into this amendment that a committee may, if it so desires, provide notice of its meetings to the members by posting a notice of same along with an agenda consistent with the rules governing meetings of the board of directors. So if the committee, whichever committee it is, wants to invite the public, the members, to its meetings, it can give notice. So that is basically the amendment to the bylaws, sections 4.03, 5.01, 5.10, and I am making a motion to approve a resolution amending the bylaws as indicated.
I'll second that motion.
I would like to request they're voted on separately, that we have changes in 2 areas. One I have mixed emotions about, but probably would vote with it, but I think there are some differences of what it means for qualifications for the board. And I think I have a board member who argued in town hall that may have a different point of view on this, so I would like them voted on separately.
Other comments?
Their problem is separated.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So a motion has been made.
Is there a second?
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
I didn't make a motion.
I made the motion. Was there a second?
There was a second.
No, I made the second to yours, but nobody has seconded his motion.
That's
I
right.
second. You need to separate them.
To separate.
Yes, I'll second.
All right, then let's talk.
We
We
have to
withdraw the previous motion or revise it.
We have to vote on what Jim just said with the second as a board to decide whether it's separated.
I will withdraw the motion, and I don't know if the seconder has to withdraw the second, but I'll withdraw the motion that I made to approve this as a whole.
Okay.
And if Jim has a motion,
Okay,
I
I'll
would
withdraw
suggest he
my,
make the motion.
fine,
So
I'll
what we
withdraw
will
my
do-
second.
Okay, what we will do is we'll split out what we have today as one into 3 separate amendments, and we'll vote on each one separately today. So first, 403. All in favor, please say aye.
Well, wait a minute, just for clarification, I don't know about anybody out there, but I think if we're going to do it separately, Jeff wants to do a quick introduction to remind everybody what 403 is, and then when we do 501,
Just a brief
just
summary.
just a one sentence.
Briefly, 403, in essence,
As a motion.
As a motion. Let me say what it provides first. 403, in essence, provides that a director or a nominee for director must reside within, must occupy a unit as a residence, must be a title holder for not less than 3 months each calendar year. That is the basic intent of this amendment 4.03.
So you're making a
I'm
motion?
making a motion to approve 4.03 as I just stated.
I'll second.
Further discussion?
Yes. I had said it at the town hall meeting as well, that I feel that resident who owns property here, rents it out, but does not give up their rights as a resident, still would have the right to run for a director position. And I feel it would be up to the voters to make a determination whether they felt that someone who did not reside here for 3 months, 6 months, whatever, really was a good candidate to be a director. So I'm not in agreement with the 3-month rule. Now, at the town hall meeting, a resident, who I will identify as Joe Vogel, proposed something that we are going to actually look into, which is that it's been very kind of loosey-goosey when you run to be a director. You write up a little bio of who you are and what you've done, blah, 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 blah. But we are going to try, I believe, to make some kind of consistent form, so it will be very clear how long out of the year do you reside in Pelican Marsh, different things like that. What have you done in Pelican Marsh, et cetera, et cetera. And based on that, I would hope that the voters could make a decision as to whether the candidate would be appropriate.
Any other comments?
I just say I'm in total agreement with her. I've managed enough associations that the qualifications for director. How's that?
Worse.
Worse? Okay, I'll try to speak a little louder then. Again, I've said before, I get deceived by my hearing aids. They're new to me, and sometimes I think I'm loud. I'm not. I apologize for that. It's just old age. Can't do anything about that. As I started to say, I've managed enough associations where the governing documents are pretty flexible. I haven't even seen where they can have an outside person serve on a board if the person's qualified, and in other respects. The point Karen made regarding they still have their rights as an owner. So this is because they're not living here or here, does not minimize their knowledge and participation as an owner within Falcon Marsh. They know what's going on, they pay the fees, they can use the facilities. So why can't they run for the board?
What about the owners that give up their rights to their tenants?
That's
They give up their rights to use the facilities. They don't give up their ownership. They don't give up their membership, but they lose the right, if they so choose, not to use the facilities. So you can have someone who is an owner that lives in Chicago, never comes down here, rents the place out, and what this would do, if you do not approve this motion, it will allow someone who who's an owner, a title holder, who lives out of state, could be living in Alaska, to run for the board.
Would you vote for him?
Which is, he wasn't voting on.
You've had some on the board already.
Like that?
I don't, listen, I'm not going to speculate as to what.
Yeah, I know you can't. That was just, I'm sorry. That was.
Well, it's okay, I accept it.
Okay.
In any event, so all this does, all this motion says is that if you're going to be on the board, if you're going to be on the committee, you have to be a resident for at least 3 months. That's it, very simple.
I'm going to support this motion, even as I said, I have mixed emotions about it. A whole part of me says, I agree with what Karen has said, but life experience has taught me that currently, if you didn't live inside of a gated community, people could come in and do day rentals in neighborhoods, and counties can't resolve it. They defer to the state, it gets into a political process, it goes nowhere. I want the protection for this community. And I agree in a more extended knowledge about the people running for the board would be great. But when it comes down to a yea or nay vote for me, I have to support the fact that we had some criteria that you have to live here for a while, because as Jerry said, we've had bad experiences in the past.
So, since there seems to be some less than unanimity here, let's vote individually. Okay. And start with Karen.
No.
Yes.
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 No.
Yes.
Yes. The motion's carried 5-2.
All right, 4.03 passes, and then we'll go on to, what, no, we're doing them individually.
Yeah.
5.01. It talks about officers, and it says that all officers of the board shall be elected from among its directors. The officers shall be the president, one or more vice presidents, the secretary, the treasurer, and such other officers and assistant officers as the board may from time to time elect. Officers shall serve at the pleasure of the board. Any 2 or more offices may be held by the same person, except that the president may hold no other offices. This is substantially the same as what we previously had. So are there any issues with regard to that?
No. I don't.
So I'll make that motion to a pass. To
Second.
5.01. All right, second.
Conversation by the board? Hearing none, I ask for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous.
The next provision that I am asking to be amended, the essence of the provision is that it talks about qualification of committee members and notice of committee meetings. The essence of this particular provision says that if you're going to be a committee member, you have to meet the same criteria as you would if you're going to be a director, which means you have to live within the community for at least 3 months. There is another provision which codifies what was questionable as to whether or not committees have to give notice. This says that unless a committee wants to give notice of a committee meeting, it does not have to give notice. So there can be committee meetings, no notice is required, or, on the other hand, if the committee wants to provide notice, the notice would have to be given the same way that the board provides its notice, 48 hours with an agenda.
Is there a motion?
You're making it a lot more simple than the wording here. The wording here doesn't say anything like you just said, Jeff.
To me, it does.
Well, it says, no, a committee may, if it so desires, provide notice.
Yeah,
The way
right.
you're explaining it to us, you're making it feel like, gee, you know, it's not a request. This says specifically, it's up to, they may make it.
That's
not-
right. It is up,
What-
it's
So what
up to the
happened to the
committee.
word shall?
Pardon me?
Why couldn't the committee shall?
I'm sorry, Gary.
Why don't you make it like we had the whole discussion at the open house, whatever it was called?
Town hall.
That town hall where most of, if not all of the people present wanted the word may taken out and say shall or must give notice, except for a couple of specific committees. This way the community is more involved.
Okay, I have absolutely no problem with this sentence. If you want to change the word may to must or shall, it will still read, a committee shall or a committee must, if it so desires,
There's the key.
provide notice. It still leaves it up to the
So the so desires is the out?
It's up to the committee. So what the board has to decide.
That wasn't the intent.
All right, hey, order here, please. Order. Gary, thank you, but we're still at the board level.
What the board has to decide is if it wants to put the burden on each committee that meets to give notice with an agenda and post it 48 hours just the way you would with a board meeting. Now, it's really, I say leave it up to the committees. If you want to put the burden on each committee to give notice of their meetings, that's up to the board.
That's not what's in there. What
No,
we're
that's-
saying is it's up to a committee to make a decision, should they desire, and if they do, they have to post it the proper way. But if
Correct.
they do not want to have outside people coming and taking up time in the committee, which in and of itself is busy all the time,
That's correct.
then that's their decision.
Yes, and furthermore, those committees cannot make any binding financial decisions. It all has to go up to the board, and then the board publicly discusses whatever the agenda is.
Yeah, but, this was
Excuse me, Arthur, we're still talking at the board level, so I would like to, is there a motion to approve this?
Yes, I would like to make a motion to approve
5.1.
5.10 as currently written.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Further discussion by the board? All in favor, please say aye.
Hang on, I'm just looking to my fellow board member to the right to see if she has any comments before I speak.
Well, clearly, it's, in this particular resolution, it also has the 3-month rule. So I'm not going to agree with that.
What's that mean?
I have
Do you understand that?
No.
That wasn't understood? Okay,
No.
sorry. In the first amendment about a person serving as a director, there was the stipulation that you reside within Pelican Marsh for a minimum of 3 months. That also holds true for people to be on a committee.
That's true. That's true.
Okay.
I've got 2 comments on this proposed change. Number 1, state statute does allow you not to post committee meeting announcements. It says clearly you don't have to unless you, I believe, making financial recommendations to the board. I may not have that correct, Jeff, you can correct me.
You got it.
But I have a problem with transparency. I asked this in the town hall. What in the hell are people afraid of? Why not just post it and let people know you're having a committee meeting? After all, they are there to discuss subject matter, and just maybe somebody who attends might have a better idea than the committee members have. So why not allow this process to take place? Number two, within this list of committees, it lists the executive committee, and furthermore defines who is on the executive committee. And the executive committee to me is something that is an administrative or a choice thing that any board may use, but they are not a sanctioned committee. And I cannot support this motion as long as the executive committee is in there, and I will not support it unless it says we will post all committee meetings open to the community.
Sharon, I had a conversation with you in the last 6 months about the executive. We've actually had a number of conversations. But you said, Jeff, you told me that you started the executive committee back under your tenure, so there's a little...
Probably the worst thing I ever did, and even called it that.
Yeah, well...
At that point in time, it was not a strong board, and what happened is the treasurer and myself interacted more frequently with the general manager and periodically had other people in, only to set agendas and make recommendations about what should be brought before the board. Never did I say that any board member couldn't put anything that they desired on the agenda. I made that perfectly clear.
No one ever said that to my knowledge, but everything else that you said is pretty much what we do. Furthermore, we take notes, so everybody on the board knows what goes on. It's a tool to assist the leaders, the management leadership in the execution of their operation and their performance.
And I respectfully disagree, Dave, that the general manager can run just as well without an executive committee formally established. Instead of putting it in here, it could be an option. You want to formalize that. You want to say 3 of the people on the board, no more than the rest of the board. Every board member was elected to have equal input, equal votes, and I just won't support it. So you can, I am not in the controlling majority of this board. You will vote it in, that is your business. But this is my stand.
Well, thank you. Okay, any other comments from the board?
There's a motion in a second.
I call for a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
1?
No.
Two opposed. 5-2. Motion is carried.
The next one, hopefully, is easy.
We did all 3 of them.
This is a resolution designating committees. The bylaws say that the board has the right to designate committees. And this says that we're naming the committees that are being designated are the Association Advisory Committee. That's the group of presidents that meet. The Bocce Ball Advisory Committee. The Bylaws Section 206 Sanction Advisory Committee. That's the committee that will be appointed if there's a complaint made and sanctions are sought. The Cable Advisory Committee, the Design Review Committee, the Executive Committee, the Finance Advisory Committee, the Fitness Advisory Committee, the Long Range Facilities Planning Committee, the Pickleball Advisory Committee, and the Tennis Advisory Committee. And it also gives the authority to the board to appoint ad hoc committees if they haven't been named in here. I would move to approve that resolution on designated committees.
Is there a second?
Second.
Open for board discussion?
I think the only thing I want to mention there, that because you're going backtracking now, I think the design review committee must be posted.
No.
No?
The design review committee does not have to be posted because it doesn't make a final decision. If the design review committee and the architectural committee makes a final decision, then yes, it would have to be posted. If not, the design review committee makes its recommendations to the board, and the board makes the final decision.
We used to, okay.
Okay, hearing no further discussion, I call for a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, 6-1, please. Moving right along, that brings us to new business. And Ken, why don't you tell us a little bit about the 2020 budget?
I'm just so excited to be able to do this. All right, let's take a deep breath and talk about what we're going to do as a recommendation. But if you'll give me a couple minutes of background. I am surprised at how much good has come out of the opportunity to add a finance committee. And pleased with both the quality of the 3 people that are on the committee and with Jim Skolin, who was our new bookkeeper / accountant working with Paul. It's a good team. Like Johan said, in the end, you're only as good as the people that work with you, and the amount of time that all of us take as board members, as committee members, to do things for the benefit of this community. Unless you've served on a board or you've served on a committee, you have no idea about the amount of time it takes. It is a major commitment, and I appreciate anyone that's willing to become a candidate and willing to work on the board and work on the committees. The committee, the way the process worked this year was a refinement in the past. We started with Johan, Patrick, and Lynn working with Paul and Jim to come up with a baseline comparison on an operating basis for each of their areas. And so that was then rolled up into what was presented to the Finance Committee. You might recall that Larry Novick, who happens to be a CPA, retired CPA from the Boston area, Joe Leone and Rich Drexler, who have been in this community for a while, those are the 3 committee members that work with me and with Paul and Jim on an ongoing basis. So we received the first cut of a draft, and we reviewed that draft, made recommendations, and refined it at that level. We then have for you today as a board, and keep in mind this is a board meeting, and this is a presentation that the committee in general and myself as treasurer are making to the board. You then have a month, as they do, to review it, and if you have any questions, they go to Paul and he will bring them up. We will review them. I will, after I'm done, however, if there are any questions that any of you have regarding process or some of the numbers you don't understand, I know at least 2 of the committee members have hidden away somewhere trying to keep from being recognized. But we will try to answer them, but keep in mind this is a preliminary budget that the board has basically not had a chance to discuss.
And if I could just add, in terms of questions, please try to submit, once you have them, don't wait till the last day before the meeting. Give us as much time as possible so we can look at it, analyze it, and see what's going on.
Okay, so, you ready?
Okay.
Okay, let's start with the bottom line so that everybody knows where we were, where we are. Last year, we made a major structural change to the way we performed our budget and ran our organization. And that was that we realized that we were taking dollars away from resales and not keeping them in capital, but using them to an extent as to help with the operating costs. We recommended to the board, they accepted, and at the time I did this, I said we are going to need at least 2-3 years till we get comfortable that we rebuilt the amount of money in the reserve accounts. And so you will find we did it. This structure this year now is exactly the same structure as last year. Some of the numbers are a little different, but it's basically what we did this current fiscal year for next year. What does that mean? As it turns out, for the preliminary budget anyway, the annual operating assessment, which is based on the roll-up from operations, from tennis, from fitness, etc., is going to be the same, $595. Now, there were some benefits, which I'll talk to you about on another page, as to why we were able to accomplish that. The only increase that we have here is the difference in the 4% increase that Comcast is going to charge during next fiscal year. So in essence, we have a non-increased budget recommended except for the impact of the Comcast. Okay. A couple of things to keep in mind. Other administrative income. Last year, I can't remember exactly when, but we switched to Iberia Bank. One of the net impacts of that switch, if you look at other administrative income, was a better investment program that they recommended to us. We had almost double the amount of interest income from what we expected to what we received. In addition, because our resales are running ahead of budget, we've had more estoppel fees and more lease fees. So in terms of other administrative income, it was very beneficial to us, and that was a very positive event that took place. If you look at general and administration, between the preliminary budget last year and the final budget last year, Dave said, we've got so much going on, I have no idea what our legal fees are going to be. So we plunked a number down there, and if those of you might remember, we added a few dollars to come up with the $1,500. We did not need all that money. So we've saved some money in legal. We also had some lower payroll than we had budgeted. So when it came again to 2020 and we said to Johan, you now have pickleball. So help us understand what you think might be the additional support necessary. And we said to Patrick, you had a pretty good increase in the activity level. What are the kind of costs you're going to have? So we rolled those recommendations up after reviewing them. The net is that we're going to be a little higher in general administration. The other part is we give people increases each year, at the very least cost of living, and then there are bonuses. So there will be an increase in there. The resale fees this year are running ahead. I'll talk about that a little later, but we always conservatively budget at 100 resales a year, and that's what we did to get to the 2020. So those are the primary areas in operations. If you come down to cable, you'll notice that we're still using some of the, I call it a signing bonus, the few $100,000 that they gave us to sign. We spread over time. The reason the number is less in the actual 2019 is they gave us a $68,000 credit because of the problems they had this year. And in a way to try to make it fair to everyone, they said, we're gonna reduce $68,000 off your bill. And so what we did is we kept the assessment, which we've already collected, consistent, and we used some of that extra subsidy, which we didn't need to use this year, and we will now spread it over 2 years. And so if you look in 2020, we have 105 and change subsidy in 2020, and it was meant to be the last full year of subsidy. We're now going to roll another 105 over into 2021. So the benefits will accrue to all the owners that way. So that's the preliminary. Now, I started doing this a couple of years ago to give everyone an understanding of the operating cost impact of our programs. And it's there. I don't know that I need to say much more than that. You see that each month. We've projected through to the end of the year, and we have it in our budget for next year. And that is in those numbers on the other page. Okay, resale fee allocations. The budget that we put together and the 12-month nine-month actual, plus 3-month projected doesn't show there. You see the 356, which is actual resales versus our budget of 284. The annual budget for 2019 was set, again, I've told you this, 100 resales at 4,000. We're going to end up with closer to $450,000 in the number for the year-end numbers, and that was included on the page where we did the projection, even though it wasn't as obvious. So the most important part of that number is going to be on the impact to our fund balances, which I'll show you in a moment, and impact to the pooled reserves going forward. So the next is, where do we think we're going to be as of 9/30? And these are actual numbers. So our operating fund generally stays pretty close in terms of cash, and that's somewhat based on the assessment. So the assessment went up last year in 2019, which I guess is this year, versus 18. That's where that comes from. You'll see that our reserve to date has gone up a couple $100,000, and so we're starting to rebuild it. We've had some capital expenses. The capital number we're using, and I'll show you that further. A couple meetings ago, Jerry said, what are we doing with the benefit from the renovation? Where does that money end up? And the auditors have reappraised the value of what we did, and that's what that delta number is between the $3,482,000 and 18 and the $4,009,000 now. So in essence, if you're thinking about it, we have a $4 million asset here, and we're asking all new owners to give us $4,000 towards the maintenance of that value that they have when they walk into the community. First-time owners.
That's building only. Property and equipment, does that include the tennis courts?
Anything that has an asset evaluation is there. It's the whole facility. Now, the fund balance, again, we're talking through 9/30, not end of year. Our operating fund balance, Comcast, operating fund balance for those of you who are accountants, those are past dollars. I call them retained earnings, being from a business financial side. That's the money that's left from bottom line profit that we've had in the past. And at some point, it gives us the option of using that to put together a less than zero budget for the year. But we've again zeroed out our budget this year. The reserve fund is building up. So now, what does all of this capital stuff mean? What it means, go ahead. What it really means is we periodically, and this being one of the years, have an outside source that looks at all of our assets and says, when do we think we're going to have to replace them, and how much do we think it's going to cost? And then we use that baseline, and it's projected out. When we did this sheet this year, we were able to use the study that was just completed. Now, it still requires further review. We will make more modifications, but this is, in effect, pretty close to about as good as you're going to get in terms of an expectation of the need to replace assets. And it also gives us the ability to project out. So if you look at additions from resale fees, again, because in this year we're actually going to end up with closer to $450,000. We show 339 as the additions at the end of the calendar year of '09. Then we project out, as I've said, historically we like to keep it at 100, even though some years it's below, some years it's above. We've just projected the 300 out. And then we have, again, you'll recall in '18, we actually had a reserve requirement as part of the assets that we collected, the assessment of $65,000. We took that out. We don't have that as part of that $1,500 anymore because we're using all of the resale fees. So that number has disappeared into the future. The rest interest reserves and the expenses per the schedule. In '18, of course, the big number was the beautiful the beautiful foundation building that we now have that's been updated. Capital account, we had expenses. If you look at projected 2019, of course, the two major ones we both are aware of that we just completed, the 4 pickleball courts and the money put to expand the parking. But in addition, we had some other miscellaneous investments, so we came to a total of 195. So again, looking forward, we are beginning the process of strong financial reserves. I would suggest that you look past about 2022. That's going to change. We're certainly not going to keep accumulating massive amounts of money, but we're hoping that we'll have a better sense down the road of what the needs of the community are in the future, and we have a long-range planning committee that needs to look at what the requirements are, what the needs are. We've got to look continually. We've got a very tight parking situation that is always going to be an issue to deal with, and it's going to require money at some point to do something, and none of us know what the answer is. So we're in very sound, the bottom line, we're in very sound footing. We've got a recommendation for a budget for next year, and I will close my presentation and open it to the board members for any comments or questions they have at this point.
What are we insuring the building for?
I don't know off the top of my head. What's the latest level of insurance for the building?
We'll get it to you, Jerry. We don't off the top.
I'm sorry?
We'll find out. We don't
It's
have-
fully covered. It's reviewed every year with the insurance company, but I don't keep that number in my head.
Yeah, well, what I'm concerned about, okay, is on the balance sheet, you're carrying, okay, you want to bring that screen back up, the balance sheet? Okay, you're showing property and equipment at $4 million today, even if it's at the end of the year. And I gotta, hopefully, we're not using that for where we are insurance-wise, because that number is vastly understated. Okay? This building is 20,000 square feet. If you take the number that we built it for and add 12 years at 3% a year, we're worth $4.8 million, just for the building. Forget what we put into it, and I think we just spent renovation of almost $700,000. You've got 8 tennis courts now at least $55,000. And you've got pickleball that we just spent about $125,000 on. You add all of that up, and we have an asset here of almost $6 million, if not more.
Well, what we have
Yeah, let me finish, please. Because one of the things that we used to use the number for generating is what we put for our resale fee. We're still charging $4,000, which is letting somebody come in here and buying $6 million worth of property, okay, for $4,000. And if you attribute it by the 1914 number, okay, of property, we're understated there too. So, but my main concern is we're using these numbers, okay, I really think we need to make sure we're okay with insurance. Okay, and the other thing we need to take a look at is seeing about generating the income that we could off of resales, because that have, well, even though we don't distribute to what I used to like, we can still put those dollars to use into the community, build up the reserve, have additional operating dollars, etc. So,
well,
when you put these numbers out, they're okay for this purpose, but they also affect the other items that we're concerned with.
I think they're all good questions, but because I don't have all the answers, though I do have a committee member raising his hand, so hang on a second, Rich. We'll get back and give you a comfort level, because insurance is reviewed every year. I just don't happen to know the number.
Let me ask Paul to assimilate that information with you and make sure we have it at the next meeting.
The other point is the resale fee. The resale fee is not just a function of the asset. It's a function of the competitive nature of where we are. And so we're always looking at what other Pelican Bay, other places are charging resale fees to keep it competitive. But Rich, you're a member of the committee and you got your hands up, so.
There was a question that he addressed in himself to Jerry, which is the property and equipment. I believe that the property and equipment is stated at net value.
Sure, it is.
Okay.
So, all the tennis courts, everything else are depreciated. It's not stated at, the gross level you're saying is correct. For insurance purposes, you want to state it at replacement value.
And that would be on the balance sheet.
Right.
No,
You don't see
correct.
that on the balance. That's why I don't know the number, because
Right.
Pat, you're waving frantically.
You know, the estables are great. But you had 29 properties since the beginning of this year that haven't sold. Some have been on the market as much as 1,500 days. And that's a long time.
Did you say 1,500?
1500. And I agree with Jerry Carbone that the estoppel should be increased. Based on the information that I've been giving the board, with 29 properties unsold, that's money technically we're losing. And there are various reasons why they haven't sold. Well, no, not just asking too much. There's several reasons. But all that should be taken into consideration. And Pelican Bay at 7,500 is going to increase to 8,000 for their estoppel. So increasing ours to 4,500.
Why do we need more money?
Why do we need
Calculators.
Why do we need more money?
There's plenty of money.
Hang on, let's let the board at least get a chance to express their points. Everything that's been brought up so far is good stuff. That is to say, it is important, we have a whole finance committee, it's important that we look at estoppel, it's important that we look at, just like last year, our focus was banking. The net result of the banking effort was an extra $30,000 of interest over the year before. We try to keep all these things as opportunities for review, and estoppel's a good one. There's a continuing focus on, is $4,000 too high, too low, or just right? We review that for the sake of this year's budget. We've kept it the same. But all these things, that's why we have a finance committee, and this is all very good input. Let me ask Paul to make sure he's taking notes, besides the notes I'm taking, and we will bring it up. But to be fair, it hasn't gotten past Jerry. So everybody on the committee has, on the board has the chance to comment first, and then I'll open it up. If you could just hang in there for a minute.
Can under operating expenses, could you clarify for me under cost center expense, we budgeted $626,006, and we projected that it's going to be $719,806, which, you know, is roughly, missed the boat here, about $93,000. Can you explain?
Sure.
Somebody explain to me what happened?
I would refer you to page 4, Paul, because that's where it becomes clear. Yeah, it's the one that says cost center summary. The essence of it is that a certain amount of that is a transfer cost. For example, if I don't know, is Patrick still here? Most of Patrick's dollars are for the people that work as contractors. So there's no salary associated with it. We take in X number of dollars at the top as income, and then we pay out Y number of dollars back to the contractor. So that's why I put this page up, although I apologize, I went through it pretty fast, and that's a good question, Jim. So in essence, what we're really trying to do is manage the bottom line of profit or loss to try to understand where we're headed. So if we have, like Patrick's experienced, a pretty big increase in the demand for his facilities, and his contractors are doing very, very well, so there's where the income is. And then if you look at the expense is also up. But net, that little extra piece that we get out of the contractors has actually resulted in less loss, or less cost from an operating standpoint.
Okay.
So that's where that difference is.
Was that your question, Jim?
Well, I'm trying to figure out you budget one thing and you end up with, $90-some thousand, $93,000 beyond more than what you budgeted for. I'm trying to figure out, well, what happened?
We had more activity.
And more
We
activity.
had more revenues.
So we're taking the fitness center and we're basing everything on gross income?
Well, no, we're actually, Patrick's sitting down with us, just like Johan sits down, and says, what do I think my volume of activity is going to be? And then, based on that volume of activity, we come up with what we think a good estimate of the top line is, and that also gives us the net that we receive as an association, and the rest gets paid out. So if a contractor says they're going to do a total of $288,000 of business, and they do $412,000, we get a little extra from that because we keep a small percent. For example, it might be 10%, it varies depending on the nature. But that little percent is what results in the fact that we end up with less expense for fitness because the volume is up.
Yeah. I understand, I see that, and I see what he budgeted, and then the projected is, you know, a huge amount came in beyond what was budgeted, 124,000. I said, and I'm asking myself, should the projections be, for the budget, be closer to what we actually end up with to give us a better?
Yeah, the answer is it has to be based on Johan and Patrick and Lynn telling us what they think is going to happen. And we work with them, and Paul works with them, and then that number. Obviously, Patrick's a little nervous about budgeting to have a big ramp up all of a sudden. And he knows his people and the nature of the work that's going to come in better than any of us do. So to the extent that if that income number goes up, we get to keep a piece of it, but it doesn't cost us anything. Better to budget conservatively than end up budgeting 400,000 and having less come in and then finding a surprise. And the same way with Johan, because to be fair, we have a whole new pickleball program and we don't know what that means. And so it was even harder for Johan to come up with stuff because we have no history. So we put together what I think is a fair but conservative budget, which we hope that we'll do better. And we have a whole merchandise program. We're just starting out from scratch, basically, that could generate some dollars. We have pickleball that could generate some dollars. But better to have a conservative budget and beat it than to have one where we expect to do business and activity and find our costs are out of line for the activity.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else? And any other board member? You,
So,
Spur.
can we just see the cost center analysis?
Sure. Of course, page 4.
This number, $252,000, the loss, we have profit loss under court sports, which is, for this year is mostly tennis. So my question to you is, when we look at this slide and we see the comparison between fitness and court sports, there's a glaring difference in the profit loss column here. And my understanding is that on the fitness side, that Patrick is the only employee.
That's correct. All the rest are contract. Yep.
And on the court sports side, on the tennis side, you've got 9 employees on that payroll.
That's correct.
So when I go to get a tennis lesson, I go and I hand the girl money, right? She takes it. She's being paid on the tennis payroll. If I go to see my trainer in the fitness center, I give the money to the gal at the front desk. She is not on the fitness payroll. But she's performing the administrative functions for fitness,